I've got 5 IEMs to share with you this week, and they all range between $170 and $220. Each model here has really strong marketing claims about its value and its benefits, but I wanted to know which one was actually the best. And so I've measured and compared each of these across multiple genres, across multiple source devices, to get a handle on how each one sounds and share that with you so you can make an informed decision. And in the end, I'll tell you how my favourites here compare to a couple of other favourites in the same sort of price range, specifically the 7Hz Timeless and the Thieaudio Elixir. Plus, I'm continuing to build my IEM tier list, so I'm going to be giving you my tier rankings for each of these at the end as well. So there's lots and lots to watch out for and to stick with me through this process. If you've arrived here without seeing the previous 3 videos on the Simgot EA1000, the Hidizs MP145 and the Hidizs MS3, you might want to go out and check out those videos because this is part 4 in a 5-part series looking at IEMs between $170 and $220. Today we're looking at the ikko OH10S, and I'm going to compare the 10S with another model from this roundup that so far has beaten out 2 other models. And so we're going to find out if the current winner is better than the OH10S or if the OH10S can take the lead. So if you want to see the lead up, check out the links in the description down below. But for now, let's start talking about the OH10S. I was a huge fan, still am a huge fan of the original OH10. And the OH10S keeps a lot of things the same. It's the same cable, which is just okay. I think in this particular field of competition, if you like, this cable's probably looking a little bit cheaper. It's still high quality, but it's quite thin compared to a few of the nicer cables here. In the case of the shells, which by the way are connected with 2-pin connectors, same as all of these IEMs. When we get to the shells, they're once again this really nice, solid and heavy metal. Now the fact that it is heavy is going to be a problem for some people. They're not going to be quite as secure as some of the lighter models here. But I think there's been a slight change in the shape of the shell design, and it does make them a bit more secure in the ears than the original OH10. Sadly for me, they've gone away from the old design of kind of the almost a hammered metal finish on the faceplate, and instead they've gone for this glass covering over what appears to be the actual crossover circuit or some actual circuitry of the OH10S. Now I've got no way of knowing if this is just for show or if it is active circuitry, but according to the marketing, this glass has been specifically chosen because it's going to protect the inside circuitry from UV rays, and so I guess if they're worried about it breaking down, maybe it's actually active circuitry. Either way, I think it looks nice. It's not my favourite looking IEM, but it's okay. And then the other thing to know is that you also get a good range of tips with these, and then from there they're quite comfortable to wear. After that, it all comes down to sound, so let's jump into that. All testing for these reviews has been done with the Chord Mojo 2 and the Poly, and using Final Audio E-Type tips, so I've got a consistent and reliable reference point. As I scrolled through some track choices, the one that I chose to make my notes on with the OH10S was Make It Up To You by Julia Michaels. Straight away, the OH10S show their heritage by producing the same wonderful sense of space in the soundstage as the original OH10. For some, this will be good news, for others, bad news, but the OH10S has a tamed bass presentation compared to the original. The original were quite a V-shaped bass monster, lots of bass, a really high treble spike, and a bit of a cutout in between, and that was part of their magic, but I know for some people it was also too much. So the OH10S has brought things back a little bit. They do still have a good solid bass presentation, but they're not quite the bass cannons that some thought the OH10 was. The vocals from the OH10S are clean, crisp and well separated, so there's a good sense of energy in the upper registers there, and that means that the imaging is generally pretty strong from these two. In this track there's some finger snaps, there's also what I'm assuming are some sampled hi-hats and a tambourine-like sound, and all of those have a good kind of crisp sound coming from the OH10S. It's not overdone, but they've got a little bit of extra spice in some of the articulation, some of the transients. They give a lovely sense of energy, as I said, without going too far. And so all in all, I'd say the OH10S delivers a very enjoyable listening experience. It's what I would call a neutral tuning with a little bit of a bass lift, maybe a little bit of a treble lift, so you've still got a hint of that sort of V-shaped flavour, but not as far as the original OH10. But in all other ways, they're keeping everything that made the original OH10 great, and that's imaging, a great big soundstage, a really nice presentation. And so that brings us around to a comparison, and this is your last chance to leave this video before the spoiler. You can use the links down below to go back to the previous videos, because now I'm going to reveal that I'm going to put the OH10S up against the current winner from the first 3 videos, and that's the Hidizs MP145. Going back and forth between the two, the first thing I noticed was the character of sound is quite different. I've talked at length in the review of the MP145 that they've got this kind of interesting, almost very slightly blunted sound to their delivery. They're not as attacking, not as sharp or crisp or dynamic as some of the others in here, but they're still very, very good. As you can tell, they're the current winner here. And so immediately the OH10S brings a bit more energy, a bit more sense of dynamics to the sound. Still listening to the same track, and both of these have quite warm tunings overall. They do have a bit of extra bass, a bit of extra body. But interestingly enough, the MP145 brings a bit more sense of breath and texture to the vocals. There's a similar sort of emphasis on those sounds I mentioned before, like the K sounds and the finger snaps and the hi-hats and the tambourine sound in this track. And in listening to both of them, it's a very similar level of emphasis, but it's done a bit differently. In the case of the OH10S, you kind of feel it a bit more. It's a bit more tactile, a bit more articulate. But then when you go to the MP145, there's more texture in those sounds. It's like there's more micro detail revealed, but it doesn't hit quite as hard. It hasn't got quite the same level of energy. It's just dialed back a tiny bit behind where the OH10S sits. And that's what I'm saying about this bluntedness from the MP145. It's not a blunt sounding IEM. It's just comparatively to some of these others, you can just feel that a bit of the edge has been taken off. That could be good or bad. I'm going to have to leave that up to you. Listening more and more, I feel like the sound from the MP145 is a bit smoother on the top end. I think the balanced armature in the OH10S is giving me just a little bit too much in the case of these. It's starting to border on fatigue, and that means the MP145 does consistently become the more enjoyable longer listen. And it's going to depend on tracks and sources as to which one you might prefer. But I do give a leaning in terms of fatigue and treble energy. I do give a leaning towards the MP145. Something else that I noticed in favour of the MP145 is the vocals are just a bit more separated. You can kind of pick them out more easily from the rest of the mix, I think. But before you think that this is a runaway victory for the MP145, the OH10S are doing everything else so well. It's really just the fact that I think they're a little bit closer to fatigue than the MP145 is. That's the only reason that it's actually not a clear win for the OH10S. And so for me, this is actually the toughest battle so far, and they've all been pretty close. And so how I'm going to wrap this one up is that I think if you enjoy a sense of articulation and clarity and dynamics, I think the OH10S is probably the one that you should choose. On the other hand, if you like your music just a little bit more laid back, not super laid back, but a bit more than the OH10S, and if you also love a great sense of texture, particularly in the upper mid-range area, so breathiness and texture in vocals, and if you like a great sense of space in the soundstage, that's where the MP145 is fantastic. But of course, I've got to declare a winner here, and this one was really tough. And in the end, by a very small margin, it's the Hidizs MP145 that actually continues as our winner. And the reason I made this decision was that in the end, I had to stop and think, which one am I going to want to reach for more often? If I've got two of them sitting on my desk and I'm choosing to go out for the day, which one would I reach for? And it's going to be the MP145 because I know it's going to sound great with everything. The OH10S is buckets of fun. It's wonderful. In fact, everything that I reviewed so far is. But I think the MP145 is the one that I'm going to enjoy more consistently across a wide range of genres and across a wide range of sources too. And so the MP145 lives to fight another day. The OH10S is still fantastic. I do recommend it if what I've described sounds like your cup of tea. And so we've got one video left in this series. It's a comparison between the MP145 and the Kiwi Quintet. The Kiwi Quintet is particularly interesting because it brings so much to the table. It's got 5 different driver types, a beautiful design. It's one that you definitely want to see. And on that note, make sure you hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss tomorrow's video. And while we're at it, if you've liked this video, please hit the like button. But for now, let me leave it to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.